The English Language Center at the University of Bahrain is delighted to feature Ms. Pamela Johnson with Pearson Middle East. It is my pleasure to introduce Ms. Pamela, who is an English language teacher and a faculty trainer with 10 years of experience in higher education in the United Arab Emirates. She has developed and delivered faculty professional development that focuses on supporting educators as they strive to create a dynamic, effective learning experience for their students. She is a former Apple education trainer and a Google certified trainer. She has a Master of Science in Education in TESOL from the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia in the United States of America. And her presentation is entitled, Remote Learning Forces Assessment to Evolve. If you have questions or comments during the presentation, please feel free to utilize the chat box. We will have a brief question and answer session at the end of the presentation. Welcome, Ms. Pamela. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. And I'm really excited about talking about assessment now. And you may also find that the skills that my colleague Himani was talking about just a few minutes ago also appear in this presentation. So, just a tiny bit more about me, a little update. In addition to everything that Diane just explained about me, I am now a US State Department English Language Specialist, which is really exciting. And in this session, we'll talk about current assessment challenges, we'll talk about changing approaches to assessment, and we'll talk about the way forward. So my first question today is actually for you, and I'd like you to tell me in the chat, what are the assessment challenges for your team right now? Please feel free to add your answer in the chat. So I'm just gonna go over here and check the chat and teaching. Oh, indeed, very challenging when we don't see what our students are doing. Academic honesty is so challenging right now when we don't have the visibility we used to have. Indeed, honesty, plagiarism, even just corner cutting. Yes. And right, is the person who entered those answers really the person that's your student? It's so challenging to consider these right now. Okay. Yeah, collusion, students working with each other, achieving the learning outcomes in a whole different way. We're teaching these courses that were built one way, and then we have to still achieve the same learning outcomes in a completely different mode. It's so challenging. And indeed, internet connection, connectivity, device access are challenges for all of us around the region. So I think I've identified the challenges of academic honesty, and I think that's actually what we're going to continue with. So many of us are concerned about exam security. Now, there's no cure, but there are some treatments. So for example, you may have seen or heard of monitoring software like Respondus or Proctorio or Examity or ProctorU. And these resources photograph and use the microphone while students are taking exams in order to flag undesirable behavior. But they're not free. You have to get an institution to buy them. And then teachers need to learn how to use them. And even then, after we make this investment of time and resources in purchasing software that will flag undesirable behavior, it still doesn't stop students from, say, recording their screen on another device. So while it makes things harder, it doesn't eliminate these issues. And those of us who have been deploying online exams with our students in face-to-face contexts may be familiar with these mitigations. So using the learning management system settings to limit time on an exam, to randomize questions or for multiple choice questions, distractors. And that randomization, sometimes called shuffle, can mean that no two students are answering the same question at the same time. Furthermore, we can limit students to viewing just one single question in any given moment. And we can disable the back button. So again, making it more challenging to get students, it's making it more challenging for students to be on the same question at the same time. Further to that, we can have large question banks that mean that in a given exam, students really aren't receiving the same questions or even the same sets of questions. So this is great, right? And we are definitely making it harder for students to cut corners or test rules. But once the content is out online, it's gone. So, you know, let's keep thinking. I'm going to show you a question, and I'd like you to answer in the chat what you think that question is measuring. Fatima, dinner at 7 p.m. last night. Eat, ate, eaten, eating. So what is this question testing? What are we finding out when we ask this question to our students? What is this telling us? What information is it giving us? Yeah, definitely. Verb form, structure, tense, verbs. Yes. Specifically the past tense and irregular past tense. But my question to you is this telling us if our students can produce this accurately in speech or in writing? Really, it isn't. It's not telling us whether our students really know the past tense and whether they can use it. It's really just telling us whether our students can recognize it if given a number of choices, right? It's recognition, it's guessing. And so with this in mind, sorry, one second, there we go. With this in mind, let's say traditional exams don't always measure what we want to know. They're not always telling us what we want to find out. Further to that, in an education system today, where we're trying to integrate those soft skills that my colleague Himani was talking about, right? Responsibility, fluency of ideation. This isn't telling us that either. So those exams aren't measuring employability skills either. So maybe it's time to rethink the role of these exams in our assessment schemes. So those traditional exams aren't bad, they're fine. But should we be assigning 20%, 30% or more of a student's final grade to an exam that isn't telling us what we want to know, and maybe we can't feel sure it's giving us a true picture of a student's proficiency level? So there we go. Maybe we can create different experiences that can give students an opportunity to productively use target language and give us a view of how or to what extent students are developing employability skills like productivity, responsibility, organization, creativity, collaboration. So we're going to see two stories. And as you watch or listen, I'd like you to think, what employability skills are students developing in these two scenarios? So first is story one. I spoke with a colleague at Zayed University here in the UAE in the Academic Language and Literacies Department, and he described their EAP course. And it's an interesting course where students study in modules. Each module has a different theme or discipline. And they're not doing traditional essay development. They're doing different types of writing. So they're learning how to write a description of a process or a critique instead of just the traditional essay. So in those modules, students receive input on the context or on a discipline, and they're also receiving input on how to structure a type of writing. And they do a low stakes or no stakes formative quiz. And then they'll have to do an output task, which they will do in a number of drafts. And while they're working on their drafts, they also have to submit graphic organizers that are a part of their ideation process. They have to submit rubrics where they measure themselves against the rubric that their teacher will use to assess them. And all along, they'll be receiving feedback from their instructors. And finally, they'll submit a final work. So this course is interesting, not just because it is pedagogically sound to have students do work step by step, but also it's interesting because it discourages corner cutting. It discourages dishonesty. This isn't the course where you can start writing the night before and hand it in the next day. This isn't a situation where you can get someone else to just write your paper for you and hand it in. So bear with me a moment. I'm just going to check the chat and make sure everybody's okay. Yeah, I love this comment. Multiple choice leads to more guessing games than knowledge testing. Beautiful. Yes, a building block writing style. Now, right, I'm going to tell you another story at another university here in the UAE. Bear with me a moment. So my colleague, Dr. Tendai Charles, who's the director for the Center for Research and Digital Education at the British University in Dubai, recently sat down with me and he graciously allowed me to video part of our talk. So bear with me a moment. I'm just going to call up that video where he explains in detail some of the challenges and their solution. I'm sorry, could you hear the audio there?
Unfortunately, the sound was not clear.
Oh, but was it audible? Maybe not perfect, but audible?
No, it wasn't audible.
Oh, okay, okay. Then you know what?
You could hear it, but the words were mumbled and you couldn't understand it.
No problem. Let me shift back to my presentation and I'll just talk through. So Dr. Tendai noticed that last spring when they were doing exams online, grades suddenly shot up to 90 and 100%. And so they felt that they couldn't deploy their exams securely. So this semester instead, they created a video project, which they set up groups of students. I think they have quite large classes. So they had groups of 4 students. They set up each of the groups with a shared folder, and the groups were also sharing collaborative documents. And so they were creating a script for their video together simultaneously in different places. And also each person in the group had to create and submit part of the video content for the final project. And there was a group leader who put together all 4 videos. And so in the end, those students had to work together to create something that couldn't be faked by somebody else. And so my question to you now is this. Okay, story 1, we had a multi-step process with multiple opportunities for feedback. And then story 2, we had a collaborative group project where students had to use media to explain what they knew of the topic of their course. So I have another question for you, and that's this, and I hope you'll share with me in the chat. What employability skills could students develop with these approaches? What additional skills to language did they have a chance to develop in these approaches? So please just give us a chat. Interpersonal communication, absolutely. Yeah, the first story 1 was individual and the second was team oriented. That's right. Presentation skills for the video, yeah, absolutely. process thinking, absolutely, for both experiences, I agree. Yeah, that's soft skills, definitely, but which soft skills? Yeah, creativity, I would say for both to some extent. Yeah, I think that we probably all agree that teamwork is needed for the second one. And I'm just going to show you quickly my answers to this question. Yeah, collaboration, definitely for the second story. So my answer, and you guys can tell me if I miss anything or if there's anything to add, but I think for the second story, students needed digital literacy. This was an opportunity for students to use technology to collaborate with others. And personal responsibility for both scenarios. So for example, in the first program, students couldn't just wait till the night before their due date to write their paper, right? They had to be responsible and meet benchmarks. And in the second story, students had to be able to do their part, and they were interdependent. And so each person was responsible for a part of a final product. And even just productivity, that sense of getting the job done, to creating the movie, to turning in your writing on time. And absolutely, for the second scenario, collaboration was essential to getting the job done. Yeah, time management, well spotted. Okay, great. So thank you everyone for sort of joining me in this presentation. I think it's so nice to have such a collaborative group. Okay, so we've all seen that we're having challenges with our traditional exams and keeping them secure. So what is the way forward? Well, maybe it is using the process, building multiple steps into our learning processes and experiences, and creating projects where students have to create a representation of their understanding that is completely unique. But those take skills and it's challenging. And so a lot of teachers have felt that they wanted more teacher development in instructional design so they can create different learning experiences like the ones that we just talked about. And they also mentioned that they wanted to learn the technology that makes them work. And then finally, educators needed to know how to assess those projects. How do you turn a video into an 84, right? How do you get that score for that video? It takes a lot of time and thought. Now, in our context, so often, professional development, not often, not always, bear with me, I'm just checking the chat here. So, often, professional development is extemporaneous, right? It's something that universities sort of grab when they have the chance. And it often takes the shape of a workshop, which is great, and they're fine. Or internal professional development programs where teachers share their experiences in the hopes that they benefit their colleagues. Now, workshops are fine, but they're not enough. Internal programs are great, but they might not always be enough. And then these workshops and internal programs are taking place often without an assessment of teacher needs, student needs, and stakeholder needs. So further to that, there's often little or no funding for professional development because for so long, we've sort of grabbed at it when we could. And here's the painful part. So there are institutions that devote significant teacher time to professional development, and some don't. But when teachers are often required or forced to attend many hours of professional development that they feel does not apply to them, I think they can feel frustrated. And, a lot of our professional development, though valuable, isn't really continuous. And so we're often going to a session where we're getting the certificate, but there isn't necessarily a mechanism in place to support teachers as they integrate what they've learned in their professional development in the learning experience. So this spring, we had a huge shift in our entire teaching life. And so institutions with thoughtful, needs-based professional development did just fine. They decided to use Zoom or Teams or Adobe, and that was the only thing they had to work out because their courses had, shells online in their learning management systems. Their teachers knew how to give a quiz or do a session online. But those that didn't, institutions that didn't have a thorough professional development program, for them, it was an emergency. So assessing employability skills, assessing those soft skills is challenging, but it can be done. So we can create the learning experiences that give students a chance to develop digital literacy and collaboration. And when we get the learning experiences and assessments together in a course, we have a curriculum that promotes the development of soft skills or transversal competencies. So my message to you today is that assessing employability skills is possible, but it takes teacher skills, and those teacher skills are changing. I'm not saying that teachers have to change, but the entire world has changed in just a few months. And so educators can't afford to just merely catch up or even keep up. I think educators have to be informed, skilled, and ready for the challenges of today and the challenges we find tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you are always learning. So this is the conclusion of my talk. And so I'm just going to take a moment and check the chat and check for questions as well. I didn't get a minute to talk about that. Do you believe we can test simultaneously language acquisition and employability skills? I think yes. I think that when I was in the classroom, I did projects that assessed the content that students used in their project and their ability to carry out the project. I think that's a great question, Alexandra. There was an issue of, let's see, large classes. Indeed, for that first story of, let's see, writing genres, where there are multiple stages, I think that it would have been challenging to do that with 60 students. However, that second story where the students were grouped, I think that that was probably a more manageable process, for sure. Okay, I'm just going through the last of these. Oh, well, thank you. You're all so complimentary. I'll come back anytime.
We do have one more question that was posed. What are your recommendations for assessing soft skills, which many industry specialists are recognizing as a necessity?
Yeah, soft skills, for example, the ones that I mentioned before. So personal responsibility, organization, productivity, collaboration. I think that projects are the answer here. And I think that there's a deficit, not a deficit, there's a gap in teacher skills on how to create and how to assess a great project. You know, what are the elements of a great project? How do you build one? And I think that that is probably our biggest gap, our biggest obstacle is, I think that we all agree that soft skills or 21st century skills are important. I think we all understand what they are, but making 21st century skills or employability skills a reality as opposed to an idea is the principal challenge here. That's a great question.
Thank you so much. Your session was so informative, and it does cause us to think about that difference between the complexities of really applying what you've learned rather than just recognizing something on a hard copy test. So thank you for raising those excellent thought-provoking ideas for us.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.